Jompie, thank you for your time. It's always a privilege on such a lovely day to sitting outside having a nice conversation.
Yes, definitely.
So we're sitting on a milk farm. I think it's one of the original milk farms that's still around, so special. But let's talk about, where does milk start? Where does it come from?
Well, in principle, to drink milk, you should have an animal at least, or there must be some a species that can provide you with it. And we normally, let's talk about cow's milk. I think the most important thing is we look at a cow, which is what we refer to as a lactation. A cow in lactation. So in principle, what you see is, let's talk about a cow is impregnated. She is impregnated and she will give milk over a period of 300 days. 305 days maybe. Let's just generalize. Let's just generalize. And then for that next period, she will go and she'll be dried off. In other words, she will not be part of the milk team. She will be allowed to go into rest, and then she will calve. Now, normally after the calving period, and that's quite interesting, and that's where the milk comes from, is that once the cow is calved, the cow will be allowed to drink on the mom for a specific period, and very important because she needs that colostrum. Same as a mother. That first two days to 3 days where there's a transfer of antigens or antibodies, which increases the immune system of the baby or the calf. Once that is passed, then the cow will be separated, the calf from the cow, and she will go in a rest period. And afterwards, let's say about 7 days, she will be then allowed to rest, and then after about 30 days, she will be ready for breeding. It could be slightly more, but as I say, we generalize. So then she will be ready for breeding again, and once she has been impregnated, she will have milk, obviously, since she calved, and then she will provide then milk to us as the consumer on a dairy farm. So, but let us just talk in principle about a cow. And Jacques, this is very interesting, that a dairy cow is very much like a factory. And people think that if the misconception is there that you can mistreat an animal and expect good production from it, that will not last. So in other words, a dairy cow, we need to look after really very carefully. Feeding regime is very important, because a cow that has calved and she was in a very poor condition will never give you proper milk of a high quality. She will always be on the suffering side of things. So we don't want that. You look after your animals, and that's what I can say our farmers are really doing. They are very important to us, not just because of the basic commercial income that it provides, but also as a farmer loves his animals. That's part of nature, and that's a God-given privilege to farm with animals. So taken from there, the animal must be well fed, well looked after, because after the calving season, the lactation or the milk will increase the yield to a specific level, and it will start decreasing over that 300-day period that I've referred to. So talking about the cow, this is incredible. It takes 500 liters of blood to flow through the mammary glands of a cow's udder to produce 1 liter of milk.
500 liters of blood.
500 liters of blood.
Incredible.
Incredible. So you can't mistreat an animal, make her suffer from poor animal conditions, animal welfare and health conditions, and expect her to produce. That's not going to work.
And I think it gives a lot of consumers out there peace of mind, because there's a lot of misperceptions. And again, farmers, as you rightly mentioned, they love their animals. They're born into it. It's not something I'm going to be a farmer today. It's not a sideline.
That is not about having a cow calving and then you start milking her and that life carries on.
Yes.
So she's, from a scientific point, when we talk about commercial dairy farming, she is being monitored all the time in terms of optimizing on her production, on her health condition, on her welfare conditions, and so forth, to really look well. Because if you treat her well over that period, you can expect a good calf from that specific cow. And again, it's a cycle that progressively you move upwards, and you optimize on your production. Now, that entails also the composition of the milk. The better you look after your animals, the higher your yield will be. from a cow on a daily basis. And then obviously when you work it out over a lactation period, you will find that your milk income has risen dramatically, surely because of, yes, good genetics, but also the way that you treat your animal.
And what on average, how much milk is
We can
produced on a daily
say
basis?
it depends on the size and the breed of the animal. And the lactation period. Maybe she's in her first lactation, you can expect slightly less, but around about the second, third lactation, she will perform very well if looked after. The interesting part is the lifespan. Recently I've been to Namibia where I found crossbred animals in milk, and that one specific cow was 20 years old.
20 years.
That is
That's
something
incredible.
unique, and it's incredible.
Wow.
But let's talk about 6.5, 7 years. That's about the performance period that you get from a high production animal.
And liters per day?
That, let's talk about 20 liters on average.
Okay.
And it obviously depends on the feeding regime. The better you provide provision, good forage, good dry material intake, that's another story, but also her general condition. So if she's calm and there's a lot of cow comfort taking place, good animal welfare, she can rest quite well, then you will see an increase as some of the factors. Very important as well is to look at, how you treat her, because some of the animals, some live in a pasture-based system, and some live on a total mixed ratio where they are fed pellets, concentrated product, which they then intake. So different systems, different farming systems, and different approaches to those two systems. So generally speaking, let's talk about 20 plus. There are obviously cows in this country that can produce 40 liters per day.
Wow.
And even more, but they are on the lesser side of the story.
It's exception to the rule.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a very important word today, sustainability.
Yes,
Again, you touched on treating this cow like a queen, right?
Yes, that's a good one,
so let's talk about sustainability, farming practices, and again, I'm very keen to understand how do we, as South Africa, compare to the rest of the world, and who is the best in the world?
Well, that is
that
difficult,
us?
but I can say
Let's say it's us.
South Africa, as the organized dairy industry, we actively participate in the International Dairy Federation, which basically represent a lot of countries in the world. What I can say is our dispensation is quite different to some other countries. We number 2 on the average herd size in the world. In other words, I'm not trying to say that we produce the second highest volume. That's not the case. I mean, we're not even in the first 8. That is where you will find other countries, high production, India, Americas and so forth, and even France. But in terms of herd size, it becomes more and more common to see a herd size of 1,200, 500 herd.
Really?
Yeah, and it's big. So to farm on that level takes a lot of science, dairy technical knowledge, and there's no room for making mistakes. You can't allow those type of operations to make errors.
Yeah.
For example, big farming, big problems. If I can sort of use that kind of wording. So I think we are very well positioned. We know our value chain. Geographically, our animals are obviously widespread, but if you see where they are, we're talking these days about 980 plus dairy farmers. So 980 dairy farmers is not equal to the amount of dairy sheds. We are in a region of about 600,000 cows in South Africa, which is not that, but our animals are of extremely good genetic quality, and I think we're in that type of discussion we can say that we are performing extremely well. We are very competitive in terms of our dairy quality and in terms of the science and how we approach dairy production in South Africa. So shortly, our value chain, let's talk about these farms. We can talk about 1,500 dairy sheds. And if I say that, we've decreased in the size of dairy farmers as owners of property, but the milk increase is very stable. The milk production, the milk production side of things, not a dramatic increase at this moment in time due to environmental factors and so forth. But for the rest, let's say you've got 1,500 dairy sheds, and then you have approximately 160 to 170 dairy processors. And then you have your retail stores where the moms go to buy their milk. That's the value chain.
So what's a dairy processor?
That would be a person that will take the milk and buy it from the farmer. That's your Clovers, if I may mention some brand names, and Lactalis and
Woodlands Dairy, so the main brands.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they have their farmers that supply them with milk, and from there the milk goes to the factory. Now, some dairies in the lesser will only process milk. That's one side, that's how we define it. But the rest is then the manufacturing of products, which goes then through a processing stage, but then you manufacture cheese, you manufacture other sort of dairy products.
So it's just, that's the raw material.
That's just to describe, to differentiate between processing of milk.
I just want to stand still. I mean, coming back to the quality of the milk.
Yeah.
Hormones. What's the misperception about hormones in milk?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of myths going on about the treatment of animals with hormones. As we've just discussed now in terms of treating the animals, you cannot just simply go and introduce all sorts of hormones in a dairy cow. That is not how it works. Also, the misconception...
Why would you introduce hormones? Where does that come from?
The discussion about treating dairy animals, or let's say bovine animals, which now includes your meat animals, cows. The problem there is that we don't need the cows to grow faster, the calves, to raise them as fast as quickly, because once you start doing that, you are most likely in a position that you are going to take away of the qualities that is very desirable in the longevity of the animal, but also to build up an immune system, a bone structure. So just to simply treat a cow with a hormone is very risky business. There is this thing about the promotion of milk, claiming that milk is RBSD free now. Again, that's also a concept that is quite confusing to the moms that's buying the milk, or the consumers in general.
So because it effectively implies that there are hormones in some brands.
There are hormones in cows. There are hormones in human beings.
I just want to say it's a natural thing.
It's a natural thing.
It's not just,
But let's narrow it down in a discussion about RBSD free milk. As you have BST, bovine somatotropic, in the cow, it's a natural thing that occurs in milk, and that helps with the milk production of milk. So you have the human genetically modified, not a genetically engineered hormone, which is exactly the same as the BST. And the intention of that is not really to influence the cow per se, but to help her to optimize her milk production to a level where it is not bad for the animal. So what you see from the introduction of RBST, it is a question of raising milk production up to a 5 to 10%. And the purpose of that is to optimize on milk production. Interestingly enough, if you do treat the animal in that fashion, if you find it necessary to do that, the spin-off is that you're actually softer on the environment. Because if you can have the cow in an optimization position, you will do less harm on the environment in terms of more feeding, more forage, more of everything, less energy. That's what you want. So
it's not just a happy cow, it's a happy environment.
Now we come back to the discussion, what effect has it got on human from a food safety point of view? And I've studied many of these the European Food Safety Agency documents and very different journals. And there's no threat to the human being. There's no need to differentiate between a cow that has not been treated and a cow that is being treated, as if the one cow that is being not treated is better than one that is treated. So it seems to create the impression that the one that is treated, that milk is inferior. And I think that is where the problem lies. So in South Africa, the use of these RBST hormones is permissible, it's not prohibited by law, and so are in many other countries. So I think it's very good for the consumer to understand there's a very, very responsible take on the use of hormones in dairy cattle. and then specifically the treatment of a hormone that does not relate to growth hormones, called the RBST.
And it's almost like this word hormones has got different meanings, and we just give it one negative meaning.
Pulled out of proportion. But why would we do those things? I think in some ways it's quite unethical, because
is it naughty marketing?
Naughty in its marketing ploys that will try to give one company possibly the competitive edge.
Got it.
Above all, the other companies.
With a half truth.
Yeah, which is more dangerous than a lie.
Yes.
So, but to generalize, I think everybody has the right to market their product, as long as the intention is truthful, it's honest, and it's not there to deceive the consumer in any way.
So talk about deceiving, or again misperceptions from the consumer part. So we've got low fat milk. There's a perception. Long life milk. There's a misperception. So let's unpack that a bit.
I think, Jacques, if you'll allow me, I think let's talk from the point where we leave the farm with the milk. There are certain quality checks that take place at the farm. And it's very important that we control aspects of the quality per se, to look at the protein stability of the milk already at farm level by means of platform testing, but also to ensure that while the milk is in transport, you do as less possible harm to the milk, including mechanical damage because of all the sorts of pumping and shaking of the milk while the tank is moving. Taking that into consideration, I think here comes the milk into the factory property, and
the processor.
Yeah. So the processor, but the milk will not be offloaded until such time that there are platforms tests being done. So samples are taken at the farm once the platform tests have been done on the farm to ensure sensory evaluation has been done. We've looked at the pH maybe and the protein stability, and the temperature is very important. Milk is loaded into the tankers, transported to the processor, and there at that stage by intake there are more tests that's being done. That includes now obviously antibiotics, number one, very important, because remember the effect of antibiotic during the processes and manufacturing of, let's call it yogurt. Once you have antibiotics in the milk, those antibiotics will suppress any activity of the selected cultures that you really want to use.
It kills the good bacteria.
It kills the good. So you cannot have antibiotic milk in your factory environment for processing milk. And
so again, misperception. It's like that's
Absolutely.
It doesn't get past that.
There's a whole array of tests that's being conducted to make sure that there's nothing in that milk that will take place that could affect the end product. What we've previously discussed, garbage in, garbage out.
Yes.
So once the tests have been conducted, at that stage we know what is the incoming milk. Interestingly, you can't compare the milk from a Jersey cow with the milk of a Frisian cow, for example, or a Guernsey. They've got their own characteristics and quite unique features, where a Jersey milk is very higher much higher in solid content and fat content in comparison, let's say, to a Frisian cow. The Frisian cow will give you more milk, but it's in lesser content when you talk about the compositional issues.
Got it. So I take it as far as making additional dairy products, that's going to impact what you can make.
So once you know that, what is the composition of the milk in your milk tank silo? Let's refer to the raw milk, the unprocessed milk.
Yes.
Then you can decide, according to your processing sheets, how and what are the needs, what must go out to the market. All the quality checks are now in place, and let's say the processor decides that I'm going to pack today so many thousand liters of low-fat milk, skim milk, full cream milk, or maybe high-fat milk for that example, and then there's a process that follow. So, and that's what you're talking about, the standards. People that do buy skim milk, not more than 0.5% fat, not more. So now the next one is your low-fat milk. It starts then above 0.5% and it runs up to 1.5%, not more.
Yes.
Then your third one would be medium fat, and that's a class designation that was created to ensure that there is legal compliance in terms of milk when it comes to the horizontal approach to fat and the description of fat in the food legislation. So you've got now skim milk, low fat, medium fat that runs then from above your low fat and to not more than 3.3%. And there comes the full cream milk, above 3.3 but below 4.5%. And here comes the high fat milk, the milk that is often declared as double cream and so forth, with a fat content then of more than 4.5%.
Okay, so effectively that's high fat double cream.
Yes.
Think of it from a yogurt perspective.
More than 4.5%.
I understand.
And that is very important because the diet, the composition of certain people that loves dairy and high fat content, essential to go more than 4.5%. That would be
So just coming back to the quality of the product, there are certain consumers that have a misperception when it comes to low fat, that maybe there's water in it, or the fact that it's long life, that it has to have preservatives. So what are those misperceptions?
Number one, on the contrary, when you have low fat milk, basically what it means is you've got less fat in the dairy product.
Not less milk.
No, it's a consumer-driven perception that some people don't like fat, for example, and that's absolutely for the consumer's choice according to their needs and their nutritional profile. Perhaps some people do enjoy the minerals and the protein content, but they don't like the fat component. So some people do like low fat. They still enjoy it. Maybe it's a doctor's prescription not to take so much fat in, but still enjoy the privilege or the benefits of cow's milk. But then you go to people that really enjoy the other side of it, and that's the high fat. And I mean, really, to me, what is more lovely than a double cream yogurt, good quality?
I've got it in my fridge.
Yes.
As we speak, I've got it.
So in principle, we start with a process of separation in the dairy factory. We take the milk, we put it into a specific silo for the fat content, or the milk fat as we refer to it, and then from there we decide on what percentage of fat we're going to put back to comply to the classifications according to legislation. From there we homogenize the milk. In other words, we put that milk through a valve under tremendous high pressure, and that then is the process of homogenization. The fat globules are dispersed then into the milk, and it adheres to your protein and the mineral, the fat solids content, and that's why it never comes to the top.
What's the negative perception?
There's no, it's a pity that, you know, the advantage of homogenization that it improves the quality, the shelf life of the product per se, but there's no disadvantages as such.
Again, it's one of those half-truths that
you know, there are half-truths, and there could possibly some opinions from scientific groups, but when it comes to the scientific evidence, if it's bad for human health, we struggle to find that evidence. So you get journals, and you do get journals that's being published. So let's say, what happens afterward to the milk now? Because we know we've packed it according to the fat content that we want. But before the packing stage, there's a very important section that we have to refer to, is the preservation stage, the pasteurization process. Yes. So pasteurization, we can generalize on the issue of heat treatment. But let's talk about...
What is it in a nutshell?
In a nutshell?
What is that process? How long is it, and what's the temperature?
There are very basic methods of pasteurization, which we refer to as the long time, low temperature. In other words, you take the milk to 65 degrees and you pasteurize it, so heat treatment, for a minimum of 30 minutes. And then the milk must then be cooled down as quickly as possible to below 5 degrees. The high temperature short time, which many people or companies use these days for a long time already, is 72 degrees and upwards to 80 degrees in that region, also for 15 seconds.
Okay, so higher temperature but quicker.
Yeah. And then we go into the different classes of treatment where there's a very high temperature over a short period of time. What are we talking about? 104 degrees for 3 seconds to 5 seconds. Now there's a differentiation. Where we talk about extended shelf life milk.
So no preservatives. No, it's all about temperature and exposure.
Any preservatives in milk. Not permissible. No additives, nothing in milk. Milk is the normal secretion of the mammary gland of a cow, a goat, or a sheep.
And that's how it begins, and that's how it ends.
Yeah, except for the treatment, the processing to work with the components of the milk. But for that other reason, no. The only preservation that you are allowed is then heat treatment and the cold keeping of the milk afterwards. The extended shelf life part, and I'm going to address just one of the treatments that you get. Very high temperature over a short period of time, but the milk then, if I can use this terminology, is then not aseptically packed, as in the case of sterilized milk or UHT milk. Very important. So what does it do? It extends the shelf life of the product from a possible 7-day period or 14 days to a possibility of 21 days. The UHT side of the thing, Jacques, is where we treat the milk in the same fashion. High temperature, 104, 110, up to 3 seconds, 5 seconds, but then the milk is packed under sterile conditions, and that is the UHT milk that we refer to. So whether it's skim milk, full cream milk that we buy, that is that category that we refer to now as the long life milk, which you can keep out in environmental conditions not above 35 degrees, somewhere there, but for a good time of 6 months or so. But all the milk, once opened, into the fridge.
Yes, it's
That's
still,
right.
and I think that's just confirmation of the natural components of the milk. Otherwise, it will be around there for 6 months or glow in the dark.
Yeah. Put that all together, Jacques. I think it's important that the consumer should also know there are many steps that are taken to ensure the quality of the milk. And I generalize by saying quality. Remember, it addresses the food safety component as well. Milk is being tested right through the entire process, from the farm to the fork, to look at the possibilities of microbial growth, because remember, the pasteurization process is there to eliminate harmful bacteria in the milk. Pasteurization will never kill all the bacteria, but it will kill the harmful, where UHT milk will kill everything. That's commercial sterility. But there are so many different tests that are applied in the value chain to ensure that what we put in our mouths as consumers really comply and make sure that we get a very good value, high value, nutritious product for us and our families.
And I think lastly, again, even the supermarkets that put on the shelf, they won't put a product there. Because that will cause serious.
That's about risk mitigation. The principle remain, we're all part of the value chain. We've got a shared responsibility, and the retailer will say to the processor, the supplier, do not bring your risks into my environment, because that's what the consumer wants. The processor will tell the farmer, do not bring your problems to my processing environment. Why? Because there are many problems that could originate at farm level, like antibiotics, like toxins in milk, like you recall this peanut butter story, for example. Things that's happening with the raw material that you can't fix later. So absolute control over the value chain.
And accountability.
Absolutely.
That's the wonderful.
And then what you seek from every role player is the issue of due diligence. What have I done within my means as a human being to ensure food safety management in the interest of the consumer and obviously the industry as well?
Jompie, thank you. Very insightful. It's very interesting. I like my milk even more.
Yeah, definitely. But thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.